In the first 3 videos, you've seen us travel all the way from the very north of Thailand, straight down to smack bang in the middle.
Does it look like I'm falling out the window?
In this video, you'll finally get to see us make our way down south to bask in the glory of southern Thailand through the final leg of our 3-month trip. Despite the absolutely stunning scenery, me and Luke start to face a bit of a laundry list of problems which starts to dissolve morale. Hopefully, by the end of this video, you will have learned from our mistakes, or at least had a laugh at our misery as everything starts to go wrong. Either way, 0 regrets.
Are you lucky? 13.
After ticking off everything that we wanted to tick off around central Thailand, concluding the comparison between the comfort of public transport versus the freedom you get with a road trip. Anyway, we had one more trick up our sleeve. After finishing up in Kanchanaburi, we made our way back to Bangkok so we could catch a night train to the southern city of Surat.
Ooh, that's good.
From there, hopefully we could make our way to Phuket. After grabbing some interesting snacks, we hopped on the train and rode off into the night.
It's like a cake with a sausage in it. I reckon it's warm because of the train diesel. Let's just blow my head off. Oh yeah.
With my stomach aching after a questionable, really spicy pad kapow, the Donnie came over to make our beds from our seats.
Well done. Thank you. Oh, look at my bed, guys. Look at mine.
And we got ready to go to sleep. Luke was actually so keen to get to Phuket as ever since we landed in Chiang Mai, he was dreaming of palm trees and beaches and all that stuff. Despite me being more of a mountain guy, I was excited for the change of scenery and the nice weather. We pre-booked this second-class sleeper cabin with aircon on Want2Go Asia, and it cost 2,200 baht for both of us. It left at 5 p.m. and was meant to arrive at 5:35 a.m. the next morning. Despite arriving like an hour late, we were excited to get off the train, stretch our legs, and feel that warm, dry, mid-November air.
It is wet.
Yeah, weird, right? Nah, for some reason, the rainy season that year just ended up lasting way longer than it was meant to. This is kind of why we spent a little bit more time in central Thailand than we were initially planning to, as we're waiting for the bad weather to kind of move along. But unfortunately, we decided in the end it was best to just bite the bullet and see how we go. Anyway, after we got off the train, we were tasked with finding a way to Phuket from Surat. Eventually, after wandering around in the rain, we found this little minibus agency that would take us. As we arrived to Surat at like 6 a.m. with no tickets or anything, we had to take refuge in this little cafe, waiting for our minivan to rock up with a bunch of people who were all destined for Phuket. Now, while we were waiting here, I was definitely reaping the repercussions from eating that spicy meal on the train last night. After 2 hours and many bathroom visits later, we were off to Phuket. This minivan actually ended up only being like 300 baht each, and it took about 4.5 hours to get from Surat to Phuket, but the views out the window were cool, so I definitely couldn't complain. Now, Luke and I had not nearly done enough research on where to stay in Phuket, so we ended up just picking somewhere that was close to where the minivan would be dropping us off in the main city of Phuket. Before I get ahead of myself, now that we're in the south of Thailand, we thought what better way to adventure through all it has to offer than to create another world-famous road trip, especially since we've been using public transport for the last few weeks. The idea was that since we had decided that we were going to fly home to Perth from Phuket eventually, we thought it would be a good idea for us to rent out mopeds in Phuket long term, do a loop, come back, return the peds, fly home. After checking in and having a peruse on Google Maps, we quickly realized that the majority of the tourist action in Phuket was on the other side of the island, around Patong Beach, including the motorcycle rental place that we wanted to check out. So to Patong Beach we went. One thing we immediately noticed was that motorcycle rental in the south was much more expensive compared to the north. In Phuket, it usually costs around something like 300 baht per day to rent out a standard 125cc bike, whereas the same bike in Chiang Mai would probably cost like 150 to 250 baht. After meeting and discussing our plans with the owner of the motorbike rental place, he told us that he would have one 125cc Honda Click ready for us within the next couple of hours, and then another one ready within the next couple of days. As we only really had a couple hours to kill, we set to wander the streets of Patong Beach to kind of get a feel for the place.
Going the wrong way. Oh, he's gonna land there. Oh.
Right, I'm being told off.
Wow, that was great. Whoa, it's so long. That's what she said.
Immediate thoughts? Khao Road. Nah, but for real, I was actually kind of getting a bad first impression here. I was getting worried that Phuket was just a over-commercialized tourist trap. After getting the call to say that the bike was ready, we went to pay the bond and quickly realized that that was much more steep than anticipated. As Luke and I had somewhat developed a sort of relationship with the owner of this motorbike rental place, we decided that we would take the risk and leave Luke's passport there as the bond, which at the time didn't seem like such a bad idea. I don't suggest doing this. Other than the fact that your passport is obviously insanely important, everywhere you stay in Thailand has to take a copy of your passport for you to be able to stay. Despite the motorbike rental shop owner saying that usually places would be okay with taking a copy of a photocopy of your passport, we found out the hard way that this isn't always true. Luke and I were turned around from some places as we were checking in because they weren't able to take a copy of his passport, so we were forced to book a new place to stay there and then for that night. Also, Luke's copy of his passport ended up dissolving many times through our escapades in the bad weather. This forced more rigmarole onto us every time we had to get a new copy of Luke's passport, as the motorbike rental place would have to send us a copy of Luke's passport. We would have to go and find somewhere that could print this out. You know, shit wasn't chill.
So much more aesthetic by yourself. There's so much weight. So fat, bro. Woo! Back in the road. Do you feel safe back there? Yeah. Well, you shouldn't.
Better get back. Should do, yeah. Need it. It's the world's worst helmet.
Unfortunately, the next day we were essentially rained off, which honestly wasn't that bad because we only really had one bike, but still. It was coming up to the 60th day that we had been in Thailand, and that was all our visa really allowed us to be in Thailand for. So we thought it would be best to find a gap in the rain and get our visas extended. The next morning, the skies were clear, so we made sure to take full advantage and made our way to the beach.
Oh yeah, I meant to.
This wasn't just any old beach though, as like Patong Beach and the likes of those aren't really our cup of tea. This was a private beach, which was only really accessible by boat or a 15-minute trek through the jungle.
Dude, I'm so stoked. The weather's pretty chill.
Yeah.
9:18 a.m. Let's hope it holds off. Hello.
As we arrived, we were surprised to see that there were umbrellas and chairs set out, and there was house music playing, and there were drinks being served. Oh yeah! This was the Phuket I was anticipating.
I thought it was just going to be another like shitty Patong Beach vibe. Did you bring sunscreen? Yes. Your boy's turning red today. Can we go in the water? Fuck it.
After a nice swim and a cheeky brewskin, Luke and I started to notice that grey clouds were dominating the sky, so that was our cue to GTFO. Halfway through the trek back up through the jungle, the heavens opened. Thankfully, we reached the top and took refuge in a small shelter. Once I had regained my breath again, I started to hear a strange oinking noise from underneath me. There was straight up legit like pigs under my seat. What? That was so crazy. That bumps this place up to a 10 out of 10 for sure.
Spider pig? Walk up there. Yeah.
As the rain cleared, we finally got the call to say that my bike was ready for collection. We had a fair while left in Phuket, so being back on my own two wheels again opened up a lot of opportunities for us to explore over the next few days. The first place we immediately sped off to was Patong Beach, as the sun was shining and it was just down the road.
Holy shit. Weather's been vibed again. How do you sit down in the shade? We could do that.
Okay. I was wrong to feel the way I did upon first impression. It's actually not that bad, and there's actually quite a lot going on around the area to keep you entertained, so
Nowhere near.
6 out of 10. Later that afternoon, we went to check out the Karen viewpoint. We came here for sunset, and the views of like the repeating turquoise bays was actually pretty breathtaking. It actually ended up giving us some good inspiration for where to go next, as we could see pretty much all of Phuket from here. 7 out of 10. Fed up with driving all the way across the island every time we wanted to do something, we just decided to pack up our stuff from where we were staying and move to Patong Beach.
Great, thank you so much.
After check-in, we decided to just send it up the coast and check out each of the different bays that we saw from the viewpoint the night before. Our first stop was Railay Beach for a spot of lunch.
This is cooler than the other spot.
What one?
This is cooler. Yeah. It's a bit more,
chill.
yeah. Of course. Give me my J back.
Nothing amazing, but still 7 out of 10. We next drove further up the road, searching for Banana Beach in a more secluded area of Phuket.
I feel like it's here. Banana Beach. Yeah. Hope that motherfucker don't fall down a fucking cliff. Man, driving with music makes everything so much more fun. You hear a good part of a song coming up, it's like...
The entrance to this beach is only really signified by a bunch of cars and bikes parked precariously on the side of a road, which is essentially a cliff, so it's quite easy to miss.
Dude, look at the views. The bloody palm tree. Palm tree.
After the minute or so descent through the trees, you walk out onto an empty bay surrounded by palms.
Now, we found this. Atlantis.
Within said palms is a bar, so Luke and I decided to spend majority of the day here, despite the overcast weather.
Have you ever tried negative cliff jumping? Going onto the cliff? No, from a cliff underwater. Holy fuck.
If Freedom Beach is a 10 out of 10, I'm gonna give this a 9 out of 10. It's very close.
Oh fuck. I'm unbogged. Okay, let's go.
We next made our way to Khao Beach, which is even further north, almost right at the top of Phuket. Anyway, this is where you can see the planes taking off from Phuket airport, and Luke was kind of keen to go see that. Other than the novelty of the planes, it was kind of mid. 5 out of 10.
They go pretty fast.
Lastly, on our way back, we stopped at Railay Beach again for sunset. At night, a bunch of different street vendors came out, and it actually looked like a really cool place to go for dinner. So, at night, I'm going to bump it up to an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, they're not bad. Wow.
After that, we just went back to our new home in Patong Beach. I honestly think that what we did that day might be the best thing that you can do in Phuket, if that makes sense. Despite not every beach being perfect, the ride that you take from bay to bay is fucked up aesthetic. Like, not just the views, but the ride itself as well. Oh my god. 8 out of 10.
Hello.
Hello. You're here?
Okay, so before we even got to Phuket, Luke and I had actually decided that we needed to visit a water park while we were there. So we picked a date and proceeded to pay 1,500 baht each for a ticket to Andamanda Waterpark in Phuket.
Oh, you're not allowed it. Have we been to the real?
So after getting through the gates, topping up our wristbands with cash and copping a feed, we were transported into the land of opportunities. The swim-up bar.
Heartless. I'm getting a Long Island for 3:30. A Long Island will send me off to a good start.
Singer pint 150.
I'm getting a cocktail to start. If there's any time in the day to get a cocktail, it's right now. Now, come on.
Could we please have 2 Long Island iced teas? Paid separately. Why are you going over there? You're such a sheep, bro. Cheers to that.
After demolishing a couple Long Island iced teas, it was time to ride.
I ain't holding on to shit.
Thank you. Okay, no, it does look like we've just rocked up back at the bar, but you're gonna have to trust me, we did actually ride the rides. This park was actually really fun, and the lines were super short, so we actually ended up riding some of the rides like over 100 times. Maybe not 100, but we did ride them a lot. In saying that, it was actually super expensive, so I'm actually, despite how much fun we were having, I'm gonna have to give it a 7 out of 10. It wasn't until we got back to our hotel that I realized that my 360 camera was completely bricked, and I have no idea how. Oh well, after the water park, we wanted to keep spirits high, so we decided to go out to the main strip of Patong Beach, Bangla Road. Okay, so you know how my first impression of Phuket, or Patong Beach, was that it was very similar to Khao San Road? This is why. Bangla Road is the Khao San Road of Phuket. From what I remember, we just basically spent our entire time just walking up and down the strip. I'm fairly ashamed to admit, but Luke and I did discover this, I guess you could call it a life hack, where you just go into the 7-Eleven that's on Bangla Road and buy beers in there.
The last one.
Desperate times call for desperate measures, and I just broke my camera, so I'm okay with that budgetary restraint. Bangla Road, I'll give it a 6 out of 10, but take that with a grain of salt because I remember nothing. The next morning, we checked out of our hotel and I went to check if my 360 camera would magically work, but unfortunately it didn't. This was all before we set off on our first adventure outside of Phuket, on our new world-famous road trip to the beautiful province of Krabi. The drive to Krabi from where we were staying in Phuket was about 3 hours, but after about 2 hours, we stopped at a 7-Eleven, fueled up our bikes and grabbed a toastie. After we checked into our accommodation, which was in the town of Krabi, we quickly realised that we've done the same thing as Phuket and booked accommodation in the wrong place. So after an uneventful remainder to the day, the next morning we found a break in the weather to see what all the fuss was about over in Ao Nang. I ended up rigging my backup camera to my bike because I knew that you guys were going to want to see what we were about to drive through.
Are you fucking kidding, cunt?
The ride to Ao Nang from central Krabi was about half an hour long, but it took you through the most awesome landscape of like limestone shards. The landscape itself is something that could put you in one of the best moods possible. And I was, until I ran into this situation.
We just drove past someone that was pretty much dead. So, pretty glad I'm wearing a helmet right now. Holy fuck.
I'm obviously not going to go into detail about it, but yeah, that shit was cooked. It definitely puts into context why Thailand is renowned for having the second most deadliest roads in the world, you know? Like, come on guys, wear your helmet. After arriving to the foreshore of Ao Nang, we quickly realised that despite the shops and cafes, to see all the main attractions here really requires a boat. With the weather as unpredictable as it was, Luke and I checked out this little monkey trail thing before heading back home to reevaluate.
Off we go.
The next morning we head back to Ao Nang, but this time a little bit more permanently. Unfortunately, due to the average weather, we kinda didn't really get up to much for the next couple days. But there was a silver lining. We had booked a 7-island sunset island hopping boat tour thing through Get Your Guide for the 25th of November with our fingers crossed that the weather would clear. Luckily, on the 25th of November, the weather was clear. So around 1 p.m. the next morning, we were picked up and taken to the dock where we were to board our boat. The first stop on the agenda was to visit Railay Beach for a little bit of a swim in the shallow waters between the islands.
I'll give you some to Maya more, bro. Wait, I didn't do it from the side.
We were then taken around the island of Koh Phi, which is better known as Chicken Island, before we jumped in for a bit of a snorkel.
You're trying to find me? Yeah. I was like treading water first.
Next we moved to another snorkeling spot, this time around the smaller island off the coast of Koh Phi Phi. In my opinion, this wasn't as good as the first spot, and I did end up cutting my foot on some coral by accident, so watch this space.
I might just get out.
Anyway, as we were all snorkeled out, we ended up just docking the boat onto the island of Koh Phi Phi, and we were treated to a bit of a feast.
Okay guys, so what I'm doing right now is looking at this.
I mean, holy shit, that looks stormy. YOLO. Don't you dare get in my way. Are you copying what I'm doing? My shot.
Finally, we went back on the boat and we found our way onto the roof, where we were blessed with one of the best sunsets that we had seen on this trip so far.
Oh, the thing's in the way.
The icing on the cake was meant to be a little splash in the bioluminescent water in the area, but that ended up not working. To be fair, I was stoked enough with the mean thunderstorm that we got to watch on the way back.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So, yeah, this was a 10 out of 10 day. Okay, so the next day was our last day in Ao Nang, and as you can probably predict by now, the weather wasn't the best, so after dinner we just decided to go out and get mortal. The next morning, hungover, we parked our bikes on the side of the road and hesitantly took a 30-minute boat to Railay Beach. Too hurt to appreciate any of the serious scenery, we waddled to our hostel where we were meant to stay. After we got to the top of the mountain of stairs with our heavy-ass bags, we get to the front desk, and remember earlier when I said some places require both of us to have our passports for us to be able to stay? This was one of those places. We must have looked pretty disappointed, as the receptionist said that we were okay to spend the day there, we just needed to find somewhere else to sleep. After a bit of on-the-spot digging, Luke and I actually ended up finding somewhere to stay that was right next door, but it was way more expensive. We checked in, dropped our shit there, and came straight back for some hair of the dog cocktails.
Whoa.
As time went on and cocktails went down, we ended up feeling a little bit better, especially with the tableside entertainment.
They look cool. Oh, there's more. Dude, its face is silly. Nice ass. He's going on the roof.
As if they evolved to have arse pad. As day turned to night, we had made some friends and all decided to head down to the Railay Beach Muay Thai arena.
He want to show you how to do before start Thai boxing. 48 kilo,แพนซักเร่งวันนี้ อันนี้แป้งโอ้แอปอ้าวคิดรอมึงอะป่ะอ้าวเดี๋ยวมันอากินกันอยู่ไปติดติ๊กเนี่ยบอกอันนี้นะเป็นยังไงดีอ่ะป้าเป้ด้วยI don't want chicken curry just close your eye อาลาดาตัวไทยจะเริ่มต้นมาบอกว่าเป็นตัวไทยลุกมาดิครับเดี๋ยวนะกินI don't knowดูนะ
That shit was brutal, but insanely fun. 8 out of 10.
You're doing my job. I'm the one that's making the recording when I'm drunk.
Unfortunately, that was all the time we could really afford in Railay Beach, which is a huge regret. I'd heard so many good things about Railay Beach, and yeah, I'm still so disappointed that there's so much we didn't get to do. I'd love to spend like 3 or 4 nights here, ideally not hungover, and actually go and explore all the caves and beaches around the area. I might go as far as saying that this could be the most beautiful spot in the whole of Thailand, and I genuinely think I have a soft spot for those limestone cliffs. I'll be back here for sure. 10 out of 10. He's a tourist. Okay, so next on the agenda was the infamous island of Koh Phi Phi, which we would be arriving to in style. After checking into what we might have found to be the cheapest place on the island, we set off on a wander to check out the place. You can't deny Koh Phi Phi of its natural beauty. It's objectively stunning, but as soon as we landed on the island, we started to notice hints of like over-tourism. I'll touch on that more in a bit. For now, Luke and I just went to the beach and met up with our friends Alex and Sarah from Perth just for a couple drinks. One thing led to another, and a couple beers ended up being a couple buckets and so on and so forth. Somehow, Luke and I lost Alex and Sarah through the chaos of it all, and around that time, I hit a brick wall. Long story short, I told Luke that I was going to go home, and he decided that he wanted to stay out. And I mean, can you blame him? I hobbled all the way across the map back to our place, and as soon as I get to the front door, I realize I didn't have the key. I go all the way back, try to find Luke, grab the key, stumble my way back to ours, open the door, lock the door, and then immediately pass out with our key in my pocket.
I'm really stuck. I gotta fucking try to work that stupid Ragnarok. Declan.
The deed was done. Everything, genuinely everything from this point onwards, starts to go downhill. I wake up around like 6 or 7 a.m. to some pounding on the door, and in my disheveled state, I just open up the door and let Luke in like it's no big deal. It isn't until reality kicks in that I realize what has happened. As apologetic as I can be, I try to make sense of the situation, but no need. With the spare 4-ish hours that Luke had between leaving the beach and banging on the door, he filmed a little vlog roasting the absolute living daylights out of me. To this day, I am too afraid to watch it all. I thought the best thing I could do at the time would be to race to McDonald's barefoot and get him something to reward him for his valiant effort. The remainder of the day was quite bare bones. We ended up getting lunch at this random kebab shop that we saw on the side of the road, though we both decided to get a salad to build back some health. It was on this walk for lunch that Luke had realized that his big toe was severely broken. Was it maybe the result of spending all night without shoes on? Or perhaps a byproduct of banging on the door all night? He has no idea. Luke deservingly spent the rest of the day in bed, whereas I met up with Alex and Sarah once more for dinner as they were leaving the island the next day. After saying goodbye, I head back to our room and come to the quick realization that whilst sparing the details, Luke was now unwell. I suspect the combination of multiple immune system degrading activities is to blame. Be it the 3-day bender or the lack of sleep, the busted toe, maybe the ice in the bucket drinks, or the salad that we had for lunch. Especially all the while we were staying in an absolute sweat box of a room. No joke, there was mold on the walls and an open sewer construction site right outside our window. It was all a recipe for disaster. Sometimes, we've now realized in hindsight, hindsight, just spend the money. With me not knowing what kind of sick Luke was, I suspected I wasn't far off. But to be safe, I decided to steer clear of the room and go on a little solo adventure to get some fresh air. I started off with the intention to walk to Long Beach, which is on the southeast side of the island, and I thought that'd be a simple enough task until I found out that it was impossible. I spoke to a random gardener who told me of this old road that is no longer used that was just behind a couple bushes, so I climbed through and followed this path until I fully just come across some abandoned resort. Everyone gets eaten by snakes. It's cool though. After that discovery, I continued on the same road and ran into this Argentinian guy who was searching for Low Moody Beach. There's a storm rolling in. I find my way to Long Beach. It starts raining. I have no idea how to get back. I have to catch a boat. I eventually arrive back to Tonsai Pier. Then, I try to navigate Koh Phi Phi's labyrinth of side streets. I found our place just before it starts pissing down. I am safe. It's getting late. I go out to grab a quick slice of pizza for dinner. My appetite is gone. I am now sick. I woke up the next morning in a vulnerable state. The room we had really did make everything worse. Conflicted between having the window open for like a slight chance of fresh air versus risking a foul waft of the sewerage from next door, and with paper-thin walls and a bathroom door that hardly shut. I mean, like, you get the picture. All I could really think about was that we were scheduled to check out and catch a ferry back to Ao Nang within a handful of hours. Meanwhile, Luke was somewhat on the mend. By no means perfect, but he was able to go out and get supplies and look for a new place for us to stay. And by the legit skin on our teeth, we found somewhere just in time. Luckily, it was relatively close, albeit relatively expensive. We checked out. I remember being weak as anything, dripping with cold sweat, with my heavy-ass backpack on, just hoping we'd find our new place soon. We were confused until we realized that our new place was at the top of a fucking mountain. I spent the remainder of our time in Koh Phi Phi trying not to die. The next day, we mustered up the courage to get on the boat back to the mainland. This might be an unpopular opinion, but I honestly think that my first impression of Koh Phi Phi was spot on. I feel like you can get everything that you want from Koh Phi Phi from around Ao Nang. Don't get me wrong, it would be well worth visiting here for like a day trip, or better yet, a boat tour to visit all the different bays around the island, as majority of them aren't even accessible by foot anyway. But if you're wanting to stay on the island, you're best off spending the big bucks to stay in a nice resort. Despite it being like the main event, I have zero regrets not going to the world-renowned Maya Bay. I think everyone has seen the reality of that place since they filmed the movie The Beach, and I feel like that's somehow translated over to the main Phi Phi island. I don't know if you've seen the movie, but it feels like Koh Phi Phi is now what the Bangkok scenes were. Lastly, don't eat the salad. 6 out of 10. After picking up our scooters that were somehow still on the side of the road where we left them a week ago, Luke and I camped out back in Ao Nang waiting for the weather to pass while also trying to fully recover. The place we were off to next was unmissable for me, so I wanted to be in tip-top shape for Khao National Park. Before we set off, a couple updates. Kinda gross, but the cut on my foot started to show signs of infection, and my backup camera is now no longer charging, so we're iPhone only from here on out. The ride to the place we were staying in Khao from Ao Nang was about 2.5 hours. So as this was our first ride since having the plague, we decided to break it up in the middle by visiting these sinkholes.
Holy shit.
The idea was to maybe swim in them, but after finding out that they were 240 meters deep, we obviously bitched it, as there was most likely megalodons in there. Scary but fun, 7 out of 10. After narrowly avoiding some pretty brutal downpours, we made it to our accommodation. We ended up staying in this small town near the National Park HQ with the intention of just doing a day trip around the reservoir. We booked our day trip through where we were staying, the Khao Jungle Hut Resort. With no clear weather in sight, we just had to, again, bite the bullet. We all met in the hotel car park in the morning and were driven about an hour and a half away to the marina. From there, we boarded our boats and were taken all throughout the reservoir. First, we set off to cruise around some pretty impressive cliff formations. As you might be able to see, the weather wasn't the most pleasant. Luke definitely wasn't a fan, but with the low clouds hugging the cliffs, I couldn't escape the feeling that we were about to run into King Kong, and I loved it. We next stopped by this insane petrified forest to disembark and trek through this little cave system.
Ooh. Blind head.
It's like, try to sleep.
It's me.
Wow. After that, we stopped by this little floating hut situation for lunch. It was here that we were able to hop in some kayaks and go for a little explore by ourselves, but with my foot how it was, I didn't want to make it worse. Next up, we were taken to this sticky waterfall that we would eventually trek up, rendering my caution at the previous stop useless. This was very similar to the Erawan Falls that we visited in Kanchanaburi from the last video.
I still don't feel like I got a wet heel, which is good. Oh, God.
After the waterfall, we were given some sticky little treats and were taken back to the marina. On the trip back to the marina, the weather was getting slightly unbearable, but nonetheless, this was one of the best things I've ever done in my life. Straight up, whatever the weather, it is a must do. 10 out of 10. After a spotted breakfast, Luke and I packed up for what we didn't know was going to be the longest day of the trip. This started off with a brief 2.5 hour ride to Donsak Pier in Surat, Thani as we were headed to Koh Samui. This ride ended up being one of the worst things that I've ever endured, contrasting massively from the day before. It did not stop pelting it down the entire time, and to top things off, about 45 minutes out from the pier, Luke ran out of petrol. Serendipitously, Luke ran out of petrol right next to a petrol station. So we thought, what are the odds? We'll go over and fill up. Turns out, this is just some guy's house. Luke next puts his faith in the homeowner, who gifted him a jerry can and a ride to the nearest petrol station.
So ironic.
My bike didn't have a working fuel gauge, so I was definitely also close to empty. Luke had to ration the petrol that he had collected in the jerry can in hopes that we'd be able to putt along to the next petrol station together. Once we arrived to the pier, we drove our bikes on, parked up, and sat in silence for 2 hours. Spirits were low. It wasn't until we were about to disembark onto Koh Samui that we realized that our accommodation was another hour's drive away, once again on the other side of the island. At this point, all we could do was really laugh. After a solid drenching from oncoming traffic, we attempted to check into our new accommodation. I whipped out my soaked passport and Luke tried to unscramble his paper mache mix. After about an hour, we got the all clear. We genuinely squelched up the stairs to our room and unpacked the entire contents of our bag and exploded it all throughout the room. Luke's laptop was wet, his headphones were broken, my film was all wet. I was terrified. With the room covered with the contents of our bags and the aircon blasting, try to dry everything out, we surrendered. Surely it couldn't get worse than this. 2 nights had passed and we had not left our room. We were surviving solely on Grab and Food Panda, and it's not like the weather really warranted us going out and doing anything anyway. The only place that Luke and I had booked before coming to Thailand was this fancy resort thing called Blue Rama on the island of Koh Phangan. We booked this place from the 6th to the 10th of December because on the 8th of December was the full moon party that we were hoping to go to. We only booked this in advance because we assumed that because the full moon party was on, that everything would sell out rather quickly. Regardless, this gave us something to lift up our spirits. We finally left our homestay and booked ferry tickets. After wasting some time doing a little bit of sightseeing, waiting for our ferry, we were off to Koh Phangan.
All good, just plonker anyway. Thank you so much.
It was only after we had checked in that we had realized that we had once again booked accommodation for the wrong spot. The full moon party takes place right at the bottom of the island, whereas our accommodation was right at the top. No doubt this is one of the nicest places that either Luke or I have ever stayed in our lives, but it is a logistical nightmare for a lot of reasons. Luckily, we had a bit of an ace up our sleeve. Cast your mind back all the way to the first video. When Luke and I were in Pai, we became pals with these two poms called Reese and George after a particularly large night out.
Go on the other side! Yeah, you fucking rang her.
Then again, we randomly ran into them walking along Patong Beach. Then again, in a bar in Ao Nang. And now, luckily, they're here, staying in a hostel called the Koh Phangan Stadium. Luke and I didn't have to sit alone, idly pre-drinking in our mountaintop chalet. We could come and mix with the commoners. After meeting up with them at their hostel, we found out about this festival that was going on the day before the full moon party called the Jungle Experience. This festival was in the middle of the jungle, in the middle of the island. Remember that.
Like this. Right then, mate. As you'd say. Right then, call blimey then.
The annoying thing about these kind of events is that you trade in your cash for drink tokens. Luke and I thought it would be a great idea to budget for the cheapest drinks possible and indulge in some buckets of cheap Thai whiskey called Hong Tong. During said jungle experience, I may or may not have had one too many of said Hong Tong buckets, blacked out, and thought to myself, hey, wait a second, I'm tired. This would be the perfect time for me to get up and walk home. So that I did. The next morning, I woke up randomly to the noise of traffic passing my room, which I thought was odd because my room wasn't anywhere near a road. Only this wasn't my room. It was an abandoned Muay Thai gym across the road from an elephant sanctuary, less than 1 kilometer away from the jungle experience venue. Nah, in all seriousness, luckily I did manage to find a pillow that night, but unluckily, I lost my hat, my wallet had no cash in it, and my phone was nowhere to be seen. This was really dumb. Thankfully, I still had my Apple Watch on me and it miraculously still had charge, so I was able to tell that it was only 6 a.m. So one very, very long story short, I managed to hitchhike my way down the mountain to the hostel that Reese and George were staying at, and I fell asleep on the couch waiting for them to wake up. The hope was that they would be able to message Luke for me and give him the lowdown, but it turns out that Luke didn't actually make it back to our room either. Hungover as ballsack, Luke and I decided that it genuinely cannot get worse than this, so we decided to continue the send. It would have been pretty much impossible for us to find my phone in this state anyway, so we decided to call off the search unit until the full moon party was over. The day had turned into night and we were back at their hostel, sitting around a table having drinks and deciding whether we should actually go to the full moon party or not because the weather had once again turned poor.
You're vlogging. It's way too close. 5 times the optical zoom.
It's a video, guys. It's a video.
Thankfully, that night, Luke and I both made it back to our room safe and sound. All in all, I think that the full moon party was actually slightly overrated. Think of the full moon party as like a 10x scaled up version of the Battle of the Bars scenario on Khao San Road in Bangkok, but on a beach, with 1 million people all wearing face paint. It's not exactly my idea of a good music festival, but no doubt it was a wild, sloppy mess. Regardless, as always with the Pommy Boys, it was a great time. I'll give what I can remember of the jungle experience a 7 out of 10, but the full moon party a 6. After a day of well-deserved rest, Luke and I orchestrated Operation Find Declan's phone. Despite the rain, we searched high and low on that mountain, using the Find My app on my iPad, retracing my steps, even bloody rummaging through the jungle foliage. At some points, I would get like a glimmer of hope that my Apple Watch had connected to something, but it was all blue balls. Defeated, we gave up and made our way to the nearest 7-Eleven, where we were to get cash out and shelter from the rain. Genuinely, no word of a lie, the ATM swallowed my card. How could so many things go wrong in a row? The theory is that I left my card in the ATM after I took the cash out and went to order a coffee. It wasn't until I went to pay for the coffee that I realized that my card wasn't in my wallet. In the moment, I was pretty panicked that someone might have stolen it, so I was fumbling around trying to figure out how to cancel my card, and at the same time I was checking my insurance about my phone, but in reality I was just reevaluating my life. Eventually, Luke and I left our bikes on Koh Phangan and we spent the next week or so with Reese and George on the neighbouring island of Koh Tao. I didn't really film much of what we got up to over there as, well, both my cameras were broken and I didn't have a phone. We started off renting out a couple scooters and visiting Thanote Bay to do some cliff jumping. Next, we booked out a snorkeling boat tour day trip thingy. Knowing our luck, we obviously had to compete with some pretty bipolar weather.
Oh my god!
We wrapped up our time on Koh Tao by going to the roof of Reese and George's hostel with some beanbags and watching the sunset, and then immediately following that up with a session of Step Up 3. Then we returned back to Koh Phangan to collect our bikes so we could ferry to the mainland, ready to commence our 6-hour journey back to Phuket. We ended up meeting Reese and George one more time in Phuket before they flew off to Bali. Luke and I spent the remainder of our time in Phuket just driving up and down the coast and revisiting some of the better beaches that we'd been to, all before returning our bikes and eventually saying goodbye to Thailand. Looking back at it now, there is not a single thing I would change about that trip. This video is obviously already getting way too long without me getting too sentimental, but honestly, that trip is something that I will cherish forever. The ups were out of this world, and the downs, well, they made for the best stories to tell, and I'm so excited to be able to tell more stories like it in the future. That being said, I hope that you've enjoyed watching this series nearly as much as I've enjoyed making it. If you did, feel free to chuck us a like and share your thoughts and feelings in the comments. As a bit of an update, right now I am working hard on my next video, which I'm planning to be a little bit of a different one. It'll take place all throughout Europe over the course of last summer. That video should hopefully be out sometime in the middle of June, right before I fly out to Vietnam for 5 weeks. So yeah, if you want to see that, you best get subscribing.